Today's webinar is navigating Chicago's latest COVID-19 regulations with a specific focus on the new mask guidance and the vaccine exemption. My name is Isaac Reichman. I'm the Director of Public Information here at the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We've had going on 50 of these webinars so far, so I know for many of you this is not your first webinar, but a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First, this webinar is being recorded. This and all of our webinars can be found at youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. Again, that's youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. So if you have any colleagues or if you missed this webinar and want to miss parts and wanted to rewatch those, you can find it. It'll probably be up by tomorrow morning on our YouTube page. Additionally, I'm going to be hosting another version of this webinar at 1 p.m. tomorrow. So again, same thing. If you have any colleagues or if you missed a portion of this or you got a question that wasn't answered today, you can join our webinar tomorrow at 1 p.m. Additionally, a big portion of today's webinar, I want to make sure to answer as many questions as possible. The best way to submit your questions is to use the chat function. That's what I just typed into. So please, you can reply to what I just typed in with any of your questions. I will do my best to answer as many questions as possible over the course of this webinar. However, as always, if you have any questions that either I do not get to, or perhaps I need to consult with my colleagues, most likely at the Chicago Department of Public Health, you can send me those questions via email, and you'll see this email address at the bottom of every page, and I'm typing it into the chat right now. That's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. So if there's anything that needs follow-up, there might be some questions you asked that I need to check with my colleagues in order to get answers. You can find those, you can submit those questions to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Now, a little bit, I just had a question come in. Are folks able to hear me okay? If a few folks can maybe just chime in on the chat if you can hear me. I know some folks have said that they do not have any sound. Great. It sounds like the sound is working well. So great. I guess I'll say to the person whose sound isn't working, you can adjust your sound on your end, but you probably can't hear me. I will follow up via chat. Or again, you can catch everything on the YouTube page. But I guess without any further ado, we will get started. Again, today is all about navigating the latest regulations with a specific focus, as I said, on the new mask guidance and the vaccine exemption. As we always do with these webinars, we're going to start with an overview of the latest health metrics that kind of needs to couch every conversation we have related to this. I'm then going to go into detail on the latest mask guidance. I know folks have a lot of questions, and we want to make sure to clarify those here. I'm going to talk about the Chicago Bridge phase. That's our latest regulations. But note, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on the specific COVID regulations. I'm going to focus more today on the mask guidance and then on that vaccine exemption. I'm going to spend some time there as well. Finally, I'm going to remind everybody how to get vaccinated. That's our big push, has been for months and will continue to be for the next few months. So again, if folks have been on webinars before, you've seen this risk matrix before. These are our Chicago's 4 main COVID metrics that we're tracking, that our health department is tracking every day. We have made so much progress, particularly over the last month. All 4 of these are dropping either slowly or in the cases of hospital visits, really dramatically, which is wonderful, wonderful news. But as you can see here, while we have made progress, we are absolutely not 100% out of this pandemic yet. But we have a high number of Chicagoans vaccinated, and our numbers continue to decline or remain stable. I believe today is the first day in a while we're back under that 300 number for diagnosed cases per day. We want to get down to that lower risk. We want to get below 200, but getting under 300 is certainly progress. Our COVID test positivity was just a couple weeks ago. We were over 5%. We're now at 3.2%. We still have over 90 people entering the hospital for COVID-like illness every day, which is still actually in the very high risk. But that number has been dropping precariously. We'll probably get into either the high risk or moderate risk level by tomorrow. It's actually dropped more than 50% in the last week, which is wonderful news. Our ICU bed occupancy has remained relatively stable in that moderate risk level, which shows that we have more than sufficient ICU hospital bed capacity if we were to see something resembling a surge going forward. So the big thing we're talking about today, and I'm sure the thing that most of you have many questions about, is that mask guidance. So as you guys know, earlier this week, following guidance from the CDC and the state of Illinois Department of Public Health, the Chicago health orders have been modified so that fully vaccinated Chicagoans are no longer required to wear masks in most public settings, including at most businesses. Again, this is following CDC's announcement from last Thursday, and it aligns with what the state announced on this Monday. So again, this was effective Tuesday of this week, May 18th. Fully vaccinated Chicagoans are no longer required to wear masks in public settings. Now, I'm sure the question that we've gotten many times and that you guys have is, what does this mean for businesses? At the highest level, this means that businesses are no longer required to mandate that their customers wear masks within their business. It is no longer a requirement for Chicago businesses to mandate mask wearing in their business. I know this is an abrupt change for a lot of folks. I know we've had mask rules in place for over a year, but you are no longer required to have mask policies. That being said, you are encouraged, though not required, encouraged to verify that people are vaccinated if they don't wear masks. This is not a requirement, but you are encouraged to verify that folks are fully vaccinated, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail on the coming slides. Additionally, you are encouraged, but again, not required, to keep mask policies in place and still mandate, if you so choose, to have masks constantly worn by everybody within your establishment. This is also encouraged, especially if you don't have the capacity or if you don't want to, for whatever reason, check that patrons are vaccinated. Again, this is something that we encourage. We know a lot of businesses maybe still don't have all their employees vaccinated, or for whatever reason, or they maybe don't want to check for vaccine cards, or they don't want to deal with such an abrupt change after over a year of mandating masks. Therefore, we encourage businesses and we strongly support businesses to keep mask mandates in place and to still require masks for all customers and all employees, regardless of their vaccination status. Again, this is not required, but it is encouraged. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this on the coming slides as well. So ultimately, it is up to the business at this point to determine exactly what their mask policy is. And I'll talk again about some options on the next slide. A quick note, masks are not 100% going away. Mask policies are in place and are still required in healthcare settings, in schools, in correctional or congregate settings, and on public transportation, which includes taxis, ride hail, and liveries. And masks still are required in all City of Chicago buildings at this point. But again, businesses are not required to mandate masks. They're no longer required to have mask policies in their business. So what is required for businesses? The one thing that businesses are required to do at minimum is to notify their customers prior to entry about their mask policy. Here are some pictures of some communication resources, some flyers that the health department has put together. We will share these out with businesses. This is just 2 examples. We'll have other options as well. At minimum, you need to communicate what your mask policy is to customers, either through signage, maybe with a notification when they register, whatever it may be prior to enter. But again, businesses are not required to mandate masks. Here are some examples of options for businesses that choose to here are some examples for options for businesses to for their mask policies. Again, businesses can, and we encourage them to continue requiring masks for all customers. We're making it very clear to the public every time we talk about this that you may go to a business, you are likely to go to a business that still requires masks, and you are, if that is the case, you absolutely can deny entry to someone that isn't wearing masks. We expect a lot of businesses will keep mask policies in place for everyone. That is absolutely encouraged, and we support that. Another option is to check for vaccination status and allow fully vaccinated customers to remove their masks. Again, I'll go over what exactly checking for vaccination status can look like. Another option is to ask for customers to verbally or in writing attest to being vaccinated before entering without a mask. Can be you don't need to necessarily check for a card. You can just have someone maybe fill out a quick form, check a box saying I'm vaccinated, or simply say, in writing or verbally, I'm vaccinated, therefore I'm not going to wear a mask. You could have a signage that says, by entering this establishment without a mask, you are attesting to being vaccinated. Or you can post signage that simply says, masks are not required for fully vaccinated customers. You are absolutely not required, though we encourage it, you are not required to check for vaccination status. You are not required to ask patrons what their vaccination status is before they remove the mask. If you would like to just have signage that says you don't need to wear face coverings if you're vaccinated, that is okay. Again, you do not need to check their vaccination status. That is a policy, that is a choice of yours if you would like to. You are not required to keep mask mandates in place. You are not required to even ask customers, but you are required to at least post what your policy is. Again, we will be sharing communication resources out to businesses to help with what some of that signage is. I'm going to now pause. A lot of the questions I think that might come in today will be answered shortly, but I want to pause for a couple questions as it relates to mask guidance. Again, if you submit a question and I don't answer it, I promise I will get to it, but that means it's probably going to be answered later. Question here, are you going to implement something like what New York City has with an app that you can register and prove that you are vaccinated? One quick point on this. The city of Chicago is never going to mandate some sort of vaccine passport. That is never going to be something that the city is going to mandate. That said, I understand that the state is working on something like this, and we'll make sure to share additional information that isn't something that is in place at this point. And to this person's point, people have been faking vaccine cards, and there's no real way for a lay person to verify the validity of a card. One point on this, again, it is up to the establishment to determine exactly what their mask policy is. If you are particularly concerned about people faking vaccination status, vax cards, or lying about being vaccinated, then we encourage you to keep mask policies in place, at least until we reach phase 5 and our regulations are lifted. Again, absolutely encourage that. We're getting as much communication as we can out to the public to know and to expect mask policies remaining in place and in a lot of businesses. And you absolutely can deny entry to somebody who is refusing to wear face covering if your policy requires face coverings. So, can vaccinated staff members work without masks? Absolutely. Under the new guidance, masks are not required in public settings for fully vaccinated individuals. So, if you want to set a policy that allows your fully vaccinated staff to not wear masks, you absolutely can set that policy. If you want to still require your fully vaccinated employees to wear masks, then to continue wearing masks absolutely can include that as well. Sorry, I got a long question. Give me a second to read this. Great question here, and I think this is a very fundamental question. If a restaurant is operating within capacity limits and they checked who is fully vaccinated, and then inspectors come, are they going to check and ask who is and is not wearing masks? Let me move back a slide for just one thing at this point. On the second bullet here, businesses are no longer required to mandate masks. This means fundamentally that, the city of Chicago investigators are no longer going to be verifying that everybody is wearing masks or following mask guidance. You are no longer, again, required to have mask policies in place. That means that investigators are no longer going to be enforcing any sort of mask mandate. So if we arrive and we see some people wearing masks, some people not, that is not something that investigators are enforcing. Again, businesses are no longer required to have mask policies, and you're encouraged to check vaccination cards. You're encouraged to have some sort of policy as it relates to masks, but that is not something that is formally required, and that is not something that investigators will be checking. This applies for all businesses. Again, we strongly encourage folks to keep policies in place. We strongly encourage people to check vaccination cards, but it is not something that is required. Again, it is encouraged, but not required, and therefore investigators will not be formally enforcing it. That said, and that's why this is very important, we are still enforcing other COVID regulations, capacity limits, things like that do remain something that we will enforce, and I'll go over those in just a minute. Again, the one thing that we will be enforcing as it relates to masks is this page right here, that at minimum, you are notifying your customers prior to entry about the mask guidance. And so that, if you say masks are required and somebody doesn't want to come into your business, they can do that, or vice versa. If you say masks aren't required for fully vaccinated people, the important thing is that you post something either via notification, after reservation, via signage. That is the requirement at this point. Great question. Where can we get these signage? Again, these will be posted on the chicago.gov/reopening website if they're not already. When they're finalized, we will also send them out via email to everybody who's on this webinar. We'll make sure folks get copies of these. You can also make your own. They do not need to be this copies right now. Are you still required to take temperatures and info for contact tracing? We still recommend temperature taking. That's not something that's formally required. You should at least have some signage that says, do not enter if you have COVID symptoms, but you're not required to take temperatures. Question here, if a business asks about vaccination status and we get a non-truthful reply, are you liable? No, that is not something that you are liable for. Again, there's no formal requirements for anything related to that. We want you to have a mask policy in place. It's same if, months ago, let's say, and you said, if you ask somebody, do they have a fever when they're coming in, and they lied about that, you would not be held liable for something like that. How long is a vaccination considered to be valid? 6 months or longer? That's a great question. If you send that via email, I'll check with our health department. At this point, we don't have any formal guidance on that. if somebody is fully vaccinated, even if they were vaccinated back in December, it is still considered valid. Great, so this is a quick overview of mask guidance. Great question here. Let me just, to fully vaccinated servers, do they still need to wear a mask? Again, they do not need to wear masks. This is determined by an individual business's policies. Everything as it relates to masks can be determined by individual businesses at this point. So this is an overview of masks. Again, there are no formal requirements other than you have a policy and you post that policy so that folks are aware of it prior to entry. So if you're not requiring masks, you should have a sign that says we are not requiring masks. Again, the intention is that everybody knows your policy prior to entry so they're not surprised when they see people walking around without masks. So you are required to post something. And again, just to clarify what the guidance is, face coverings, the update from the CDC, from the state, and from the city is that face coverings are not required if you are fully vaccinated. So a business can choose to not check for masks, to not require masks, but at minimum, your signage should say that face coverings aren't required if you're unvaccinated. You don't need to check. You don't necessarily need to allow any sort of attestation, but your signage should at least say face coverings are not required if you are fully vaccinated. So in addition to the mask guidance, one of the big things I wanted to cover today is the vaccine exemption. This is, as I said before, and as I'll get into more detail, capacity limits remain in place. We are still in the Chicago Bridge phase. We are not operating at 100% capacity. And in just a couple slides, I'll go over that bridge phase in a couple details. See a couple questions. Yes, there are still capacity restrictions. However, there is a vaccine exemption that allows you as a business to go above those capacity limits. This is an overview of that vaccine exemption. Importantly, businesses have the option of taking advantage of this vaccine exemption. You are not required to do so. It is an option. If you don't want to do the vaccine exemption, then you follow the Chicago Bridge phase regulations. If you choose to increase capacity through the vaccine exemption, then you must verify vaccine status. Unlike with masks, this is not something we're encouraging. If you want to increase capacity under the vaccine exemption, then you are required to verify vaccine status. There's 4 parts to the vaccine exemption, 4 options here. First, fully vaccinated individuals do not count towards the capacity limits, the COVID capacity limits. You still are required to have 6 feet of social distancing unless everybody is fully vaccinated. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So we have capacity limits in place. If you are fully vaccinated, you do not count towards those capacity limits, again, if you check for vaccination. Additionally, bars, restaurants, and any other establishment that allows for on-site consumption of food or alcohol, you can increase your table or party size above the limit of 10 if everybody at that table that is over the age of 16 is fully vaccinated. Again, I'll go over all these in more detail in just a few slides. If you have a late hour liquor license, you can operate later without hour restrictions if you're only having fully vaccinated patrons within your establishment. Finally, and this is something new that just came into effect this Thursday, if you as an establishment choose to check vaccination status and make sure that only fully vaccinated customers and employees are within your establishment, then you can operate fully without COVID-19 restrictions. That means having tables within closer than 6 feet, having as many people as you want, having masks fully off, having close dancing, all COVID regulations are lifted if everybody within an establishment, including staff and customers, are fully vaccinated. That is, I know that's not something that most businesses will do, but if a business wants to do this, they can. I know some smaller establishments, some late night establishments want to do this so that they can increase capacity. You absolutely can if everybody is fully vaccinated and if you verify vaccine status. And that's something I'll go over in just a few slides. Before I go over this vaccine exemption in a little bit more detail, I wanted to provide an overview of where we're at in the Chicago Bridge phase. Again, these are the regulations that you should be following, no matter what your mask policy is, no matter whether you're checking, this is if you're not checking vaccine status, you're not increasing capacity, this is what every business should be operating at. Indoors at bars and restaurants at 75% capacity. Standing areas, indoors or outdoors, at 25% capacity. Table size limited to no more than 10. Folks that are sitting at the counter limited to no more than 6. Bars and restaurants can now be open following normal liquor license hours, which means closing by 2 most days and 3 a.m. on Saturday nights. And tables must be spaced so that patrons are 6 feet apart from patrons at other tables. Again, that remains in place unless you are checking vaccine status and everybody in your establishment is vaccinated. Social events limited to no more than 250 indoors and 500 outdoors, with the food service and bar regulations I just read being followed, meaning no more than 10 per table and standing areas at 25% capacity. Commercial and residential buildings and hotels limited to 60% capacity within their regular space, and the relevant regulations must be followed for those activities, meaning food service, events, meetings, health and fitness centers should be following those guidelines. Recreation, no more than 50% or 100 people per space indoors. Outdoors, no capacity limit with groups of no more than 100. Meetings, conferences, and conventions limited to the lesser of 60% or 100 people, and you can opt to follow social event capacity limits for those smaller locations. Museums, 60%, personal services, 60%, retail stores, 60%, performance venues, health and fitness centers, 60%, indoor group classes for health and fitness centers, limited to no more than 50 indoors and 100 outdoors. Festivals, general admission, spectator events, outdoor spectator events, flea and farmer markets. We're actually following the state regulations exactly on those. And then places of worship limited to 60% capacity. As a reminder, though, you can, and this is a similar slide to what we just had, if you want to, you can choose to take advantage of the vaccine exemption to increase your capacity in the following ways. Fully vaccinated folks don't count towards capacity limits. Table size can be above the limit of 10 if everybody 16 or older is fully vaccinated within that table. Late hour places can open without hour restrictions if only fully vaccinated patrons enter. And finally, if you choose to only have fully vaccinated staff and customers within your entire establishment, or perhaps within one room of your establishment, you can operate fully without COVID-19 restrictions within your entire establishment or within that designated room or space. Again, if you want to take advantage of the vaccine exemption to increase capacity, you must verify vaccine status. If you want to allow folks without masks, you are not required to check vaccine status, though we encourage it. But if you want to increase capacity beyond the bridge phase limits, then you must verify vaccine status. And I'll talk about that on this slide. First, what is fully vaccinated? What does fully vaccinated mean? That means 14 days after the final dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, 2 weeks after the final dose of your second shot, if we're talking Pfizer or Moderna, and 14 days after your single Johnson & Johnson shot. It may be the case that some folks, maybe from other countries, are vaccinated with a different vaccine. If you go to our reopening website, you can find a full list of what is a possible COVID vaccine to count towards fully vaccinated if you have folks, again, coming from other countries where perhaps other vaccinations are used. Again, it is not a requirement that you check vaccination status. It's not a requirement that you increase capacity. But if you don't check vaccination status, then you follow the Chicago Bridge phase regulations. So if you choose to take part in this vaccine exemption, you are responsible for verifying that patrons are fully vaccinated. That means checking for vaccination card. That means maybe looking at a photo or a photocopy of the vaccination card. You do not need to check the original. Or it can be as simple as a printout, a photo, electronic proof of vaccine records with the patron's name. Again, we want to make sure that businesses that are increasing capacity are doing their due diligence, but it is not a requirement that you do this if you want to just follow the Chicago Bridge Phase regulations. You do need to check, though, if you want to increase capacity beyond these rules. So what are you then required once you check vaccine status if you want to increase capacity? What you're required to do is track which customers are under the vaccine exemption while they're in the establishment. And if an investigator shows up, you need to demonstrate to the investigator who is and who is not vaccinated. For example, we show up and we see a table of 20 people. You need to at least be able to verify that everybody 16 or older at that table is fully vaccinated. It does not need to be a log. It simply needs to be, you simply need to know as an establishment who is and who isn't vaccinated if you're taking advantage of the vaccine exemption. I know some places are using wristbands, some are using stamps. You can maybe, if you have people sitting around a table, you can very simply just have stamps, you can have an X maybe on the seats, things like that. Additionally, a customer should be prepared to show proof of vaccination to our investigators that matches the information that the establishment is tracking. We do not want this to be a heavy lift. Great. So it can be a stamp, it can be a wristband. Absolutely, you can use something like that. So who is responsible when it comes to the vaccine exemption? If you're licensed by BACP, very simply, whoever the licensed entity is responsible for doing this verification. Now, for example, if you're an event venue, you can delegate this responsibility to the event organizer, but ultimately it is the licensee that is responsible because that is how our enforcement authority works. That's who's responsible for all of these regulations. Now, if you're not licensed by BACP, for example, offices or places of worship, then at minimum you need an on-site designee of the building owner or a leaseholder that is responsible. Again, it does not need to be the building owner, but you need to have somebody on site who is responsible. One question we get, we've gotten regularly, and this is a change that actually just came into effect on Tuesday, is dance floors at weddings. So dance floors can reopen at social events such as weddings with fully vaccinated individuals allowed to dance without face coverings and without physical distancing. Again, this is a change, just came into effect for social events. Unvaccinated individuals should continue to wear masks and maintain physical distancing as much as possible while dancing, especially indoors. So if you're a venue that wants to open your dance floor for a wedding, you are responsible to verify that guests that are dancing without face coverings and without physical distancing are fully vaccinated. And guests should be prepared to show proof of vaccination that matches the information tracked by the venue. So long story short, dance floors at weddings can open. People that are dancing without masks and without social distancing, they should be fully vaccinated, and the venue should be checking and verifying that. Great. Now I'm going to provide a quick kind of matrix to provide an overview of hopefully all of the information that we've covered, and we will, and then I'll open it up for questions. So we're going to talk about capacity limits, mask guidance, and table seating. So if a business chooses not to verify vaccination status of patrons or staff, again, totally fine to not check. We expect most places will not check. Then you should be following the bridge phase limits when it comes to capacity. Masks are recommended for all patrons and staff, and they're not required, but you are encouraged to still require masks for everybody. Tables should be limited to no more than 10 people under the bridge phase limits. Scenario 2, you choose to verify vaccination status of patrons or staff and still allow everybody in, but you're choosing to check for vaccination status. If you do that, when it comes to capacity, your fully vaccinated folks do not count towards capacity limits. So you can go above that bridge phase capacity. Masks are not required for fully vaccinated patrons if you're checking, but they should be worn by everyone else, including staff. Tables can go above that limit of 10 if everybody 16 or older is fully vaccinated. In the final scenario, if you choose to check vaccination status and only admit folks that are fully vaccinated, then you can operate full capacity, no capacity limits, no limits on party size, and masks are not required. Again, you can choose to operate fully in pre-COVID ways if you choose to admit only fully vaccinated patrons. That means no 6 feet of distancing between parties, dancing, everything back to what it was before. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't remind everybody of how widely available the vaccine is for all Chicagoans age 12 and older. I know we got a lot of summer events coming back. We're very much moving in that direction of reopening, and there's a lot of incentives to make sure that people are fully vaccinated because you can increase capacity, you can have more people per table, open dance floors, things like that. So please make sure your employees are vaccinated. We recommend, sharing information with your customers. Chicago.gov/vaccine finder. You can make appointments, walk-ins, widely available all over the city. Also 312-746-4835. Great. I know that was a lot of information. I saw a couple questions come in as seeing if this will be recorded. Yes, this webinar is going to be recorded. It's going to be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Should be posted, if not today, at least by tomorrow morning. Now I'm going to open it up to questions. Great. Do you have to be 18 or older and vaccinated for the new mask rules to apply? For example, if you're under 18 and vaccinated, are you still required to wear masks? Great question. The health order basically says if you're fully vaccinated, you do not need to wear masks. That can be 12-year-olds, that can be 16-year-olds. It does not differentiate at age, only fully vaccinated versus not vaccinated. Though to be clear, 12-year-olds are only eligible of the vaccine as of, I believe, last week, perhaps 2 weeks ago. I apologize, I'm not 100% sure. And the only vaccine that is eligible for 12-year-olds, 12 to 15-year-olds, is a 2-dose vaccine. So there are no 12, 13, 14, or 15-year-olds that are fully vaccinated at this point, and there won't be for another 3 or 4 weeks. Great. Again, as a reminder, when it comes to social distancing, 6 feet of social distancing is still required between parties. The only time that you can remove that 6 feet of social distancing is if you are checking for vaccination status and if everybody in your establishment, or perhaps in a single room that you want to designate as such, is fully vaccinated. Again, 6 feet of social distancing is still required unless every single person is fully vaccinated. That includes staff. Right? Great question here when it comes to vaccine exemption. Can a verbal verification of the vaccination status be used for the vaccine exemption? No. If you want to take advantage of a vaccine exemption and increase your capacity, a verbal verification is not enough. You need to actually check for vaccination status. Again, it does not need to be the original of a vaccine card. It can be a photo, it can be a photocopy, it can be an email. With vaccination status, it can be, we're telling folks as simple as taking a picture and having it on your phone. It does not need to be too heavy of a lift, but a verbal verification is not enough. Yep. Again, the link to this website will be on youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Right. So we've got a couple questions coming in as it relates to a business asking for vaccination status. A business absolutely can ask for vaccination status. Again, we as the city are not telling you that you have to. If you want to increase your capacity beyond the bridge phase, then you are required to, but you do not have to ask for vaccine status because you can operate under the bridge phase absolutely without asking. Now, we know that there's a lot of nuance here, that businesses have a lot of different policies. So we do recommend that you consult with an attorney to make sure if you have kind of detailed questions as it relates to vaccine and those sort of things. Right. So question here, a couple questions coming in as it relates to dance floors. So what happens if you verify, then halfway through they take off masks and jump on the floor? So again, if you want to open dance floors, fully vaccinated folks can do it without masks. You do need to have masks if you're unvaccinated, however. What we ask is that you as a business, do your due diligence, communicate to your venue organizer. At the end of the day, if you've checked and you've verified and you've communicated, that is ultimately what the responsibility of the business is. Great question here. Can we reopen dance floors at bars or performance venues? So I'll go back to this dance floor page. This specific guidance here as it relates to dance floors is specifically for social events such as weddings. So again, if a wedding wants to open a dance floor, you need to check for vaccine status. And the only people who should be dancing without masks on and in close proximity are those that are vaccinated. If you're a bar or a nightclub or a performance venue and you want to open up your dance floor, the way that you do that is if you take advantage of the vaccine exemption, check for vaccine status, and only let people who are fully vaccinated within an establishment. Because again, you can operate fully without COVID restrictions, fully back to how things were February of 2020, if everybody is fully vaccinated. So, you can open a dance floor at a bar or performance venue if every single person is fully vaccinated. Question, once we go to phase 5, does all of this go away? Yes. I know there's a lot of nuance, a lot of complication here. I know there's a lot of abrupt changes. We expect that some businesses might keep social distancing policies in place themselves as we get to phase 5, but phase 5 is a lifting of all of these social distancing rules when we get to phase 5. Right. So for children under the age of 12, are they still required to wear a mask? So under the health order, everybody who is fully vaccinated does not need to wear a mask. Now, the counter to that is if you are not fully vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask. So children under the age of 12, actually, 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds, none of them are fully vaccinated at this point because they only were just recently eligible for the vaccine. They are still required to wear a mask. But again, there are the business is not, you are not responsible as a business for that. Your responsibility is sharing, at minimum, to share information on what your policy is. But children under 12 are still expected to be wearing masks at this point. What are the fines for places that are not verifying that they are vaccinating guests and within the what is the fine if places are found that they weren't verifying vaccinated guests and were increasing capacity under the vaccine exemption? So that would be our standard COVID fine. We've been enforcing COVID regulations for over a year now, and it would be no different than any other COVID violation. Fines range technically up to $10,000. We almost never, if ever, have actually reached that. Fines are typically much lower. And certainly we know that this is very complicated. We anticipate if we see minor violations to be issuing notices to correct, which are just warnings at this point. But you can be fined if you're not verifying vaccinated guests. But yes. Yep. Great. A couple questions here. When is the current projection for when the city of Chicago will transition to phase 5? You know, I'm not, as I kind of add for a caveat on every single one of these webinars, I am not the Chicago Department of Public Health. I don't pretend to be the health expert, so I do not have a prediction for when we will reach phase 5. As you know, the state has said it may be as soon as June 11th. We've indicated very publicly that we'll definitely be there by July 4th. So I guess I'll say sometime between June 11th and July 4th, you know, we'll look to our Department of Public Health to share additional information as we get closer. You know, I don't want to make a prediction because we obviously look to our health colleagues. What metrics are we trying to reach to enter phase 5? So the biggest, most fundamental thing is vaccination status, is making sure we get more and more people vaccinated. Right now, we're doing great in Chicago in so many ways. Less than 40%, though, of Chicagoans are fully vaccinated. Less than 40% of all Chicagoans are fully vaccinated. So we need to up that number. I don't know, don't have the exact number. Again, I look to our colleagues in the Department of Public Health. But at this point, at this point, I don't have a definite projection, but we'll certainly be sharing information, and I expect the health department to make some more information public within the next few days and weeks. I apologize. I know that you guys want some more definitive projections, and we'll certainly share those when we have them. Okay. Question here, definition of fully vaccinated. So fully vaccinated means everybody must be fully vaccinated. So if you are an establishment that wants to have less than 6 feet of social distancing and wants to fully operate pre-COVID regulations, then you need everybody fully vaccinated. Obviously, that means that kids under the age of 12 who are not vaccinated would not be able to be on premises. Now, that said, weddings can still operate. You can still have a dance floor, for example, open without having everybody within the establishment be fully vaccinated. But those folks that are not vaccinated, which includes kids, should not be dancing in close proximity to others, and they should be wearing masks while they're on the dance floor. Okay. Question here, can a choir sing at church if everyone is masked? Let me actually check with the Department of Public Health for the latest guidelines as they relate to places of worship. So if you send that question via email, I'll type it into the chat. That's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. I'll get you an answer to that question. Had a question also too, what is considered a healthcare setting? Can you please send that question via email too, and I'll get some clarity from our Department of Public Health for that question as well. We're a residential community. Do you think it is a good idea to allow guests into our amenities at this time? So, at this time, what I can say is you are allowed to allow guests into your amenities. It's up to, establishments, residential establishments to determine their specific policies. The message we want to get across is that we are making significant progress. And if you are fully vaccinated, you can really get life close to back to what it was back before COVID. But the only way we're going to get fully back to normal, back to where we were, is if more and more people get fully vaccinated. So, we recommend if folks are concerned to keep some additional policies in place at this point. Okay. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. It'll be posted to our YouTube page. I know some folks were late joining. That's youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. You can also find all of this information, including the including FAQ documents on the mask guidance and on the vaccine exemption. You can find all of that on that reopening website. The question here, and I understand the challenge here. How are we supposed to handle customers that get angry if other people in our business have a mask on, or vice versa? So, we know that this is a challenging topic, a challenging subject for businesses right now. We're not naive to the challenge of both, and truly, as this question makes clear, in both directions, both businesses that maybe will allow people without masks, and the concern that places for people that are wearing masks, and vice versa, to still require masks, while some individuals maybe have strong opinions that they do not need to wear a mask. The couple important things I can say is that you as a business can absolutely set your policy, and the city supports that policy. And we're communicating out to aldermen, to our local business organizations, to all our neighborhood groups, to get the information out, and doing so publicly, in interviews on social media, that mask policies can and will remain in place for some businesses. And you absolutely can deny entry to customers that refuse to follow your mask policy. So at the end of the day, if we don't encourage confrontation, but if there is something that is rising to confrontation, to absolutely to call police if necessary. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. We know businesses have frankly and unfortunately been dealing with this over the last year. Obviously it gets a little bit more challenging here, but if there's any support that we can provide to you as a business, again, we want to make it very, very clear to the public to expect to have masks on, to absolutely expect that masks won't go away. So we ask that you don't seek out that confrontation, but if necessary, police can be involved. You can call 911 in certain situations. We got a couple minutes left. I'm going to stick around for additional questions. Again, if I do not answer your question, and I'm going to keep this vaccine reminder up, to please email BACP outreach@cityofchicago.org, and I'll get you those answers. Question here, just to verify, if you have separate rooms in a club, can you allow dancing in one room if every person is vaccinated, but have another room where current COVID restrictions are enforced? Yes, this exemption can apply per room, not the entire establishment. The important thing though, employees would need to be fully vaccinated as well. So within that room that you're not following any COVID rules, you need to have everybody fully vaccinated, including employees. Again, if you have specific questions as it relates to what you can ask your employees, we do ask that you consult an attorney on those questions. Our guidance from the city is that you certainly can ask for vaccine status. You certainly can ask your employees for vaccine status, but we do ask that you consult attorneys for more detailed questions there. Great, and do please, if I did not answer your question, I apologize. There were a lot that come through. I might have missed some as I was scrolling through. If I did not answer them, either resubmit them right now, or please submit those questions via the BACP outreach email. Again, we know that this is an incredibly challenging time for businesses. We're really excited to be reopening in the way that we are, and to be ramping up, and to be making such progress, and to, again, hopefully be getting back to normal soon. This is absolutely what we want, and we're very, very hopeful that we'll be there soon. We thank you guys for your continued diligence, for joining this webinar, for joining all of the other webinars, to follow these rules. And anything, if you have any suggestions, any other tips, please send those via email. Any other way that the city can help, we will be happy to help. Thank you all for joining, and have a great day.